And welcome to our industry colleagues, to our TasCOSS members and supporters, to those people who are joining us online today and in person. We're really happy to have you here. It's an absolute pleasure today to be gathered on the land of the Muwinina people of the southeast nation of Lutruwita, Tasmania, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I welcome the strong Aboriginal voices in the room today. I also acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded by the Tasmanian Aboriginals, and I thank them for their ongoing important work of caring for land, waterways, sea and culture. This week, TasCOSS proudly supports National Reconciliation Week and its powerful theme, Bridging Now to Next. For TasCOSS, it's a time to reflect, to think about and to reaffirm our commitment to reconciliation. And we stand with Aboriginal communities across Lutruwita, Tasmania, walking together on the path from acknowledgement to action and from now to what's next. So welcome. It's great to see so many people in the room today and supporting our community services industry annual budget event. In particular, I would like to thank representing the Tasmanian Government, the Minister for Community Services, the Hon Roger Jaensch MP, who we'll hear from shortly. I'd also like to acknowledge and welcome the many elected members of Parliament in the room today, and they're listed here on the screen. I'd also like to welcome TasCOSS Board and TasCOSS President Georgie Ibbott, and also our valued TasCOSS Life members, our members and supporters, and the TasCOSS team. The Treasurer's theme this year is a budget that builds a better Tasmania, now and for the future, by investing in the things that matter to Tasmanians. So what does matter to Tasmanians? When we talk to Tasmanians in the community about what matters to them, they tell us that it's a safe, affordable place to call home. It's the ability to put food on the table, to access healthcare, and ensuring the next generation, our children, are safe and supported. These things top their priority list. And while we recognise that there is broad support for an AFL team, a new stadium isn't a high priority for the many Tasmanians that we speak to. This budget allocates significant investments in health and education that matter to us all, but it also allocates $3.5 billion for hard infrastructure, with significant financial capital consumed by cost blowouts and planning mistakes that could have been avoided. This will send us into debt for generations. So when we're told that the budget can't afford measures to improve wellbeing, such as boosts to preventative health or digital inclusion programs, we know that it's not because of a limit of resources. It is a choice concerning what matters to this government. Minister, in building a better and fairer Tasmania where everyone can live a good life, we, along with our members, remain committed and stand ready, working in genuine partnership with the government to deliver on the investments and services that matter to Tasmanians. And it's only by taking a united, long-term and shared vision of the things that matter the most that we will build a better Tasmania now and for the future. Now on to our budget analysis. And I won't delve that much into the state's finances in great detail today. Instead, I would really like to invite you to come along to our post-budget policy conversation next week with Professor Richard Ecclestone. But of course, this slide sets the scene for the budget challenge the government is now faced with and shows net debt increasing to $7.3 billion next financial year and $10.8 billion over the forward estimates. The interest payments on those debts are increasing to $350 million next financial year and $650 million over the forward estimates. The main point here for our industry is the greater the cost of the debt, the less funding that's available to provide essential services to the Tasmanian community, and this means that Tasmanians themselves are the ones that miss out. This budget spends more than $2 billion on servicing government debt, money that could have been used to build 5,000 social and affordable homes, providing housing for everyone on the social housing waitlist, or providing energy efficiency upgrades for every household in Tasmania, thereby bringing down energy bills over the long term. In Saul Eslake's independent review of Tasmania's state finances, he warned that if nothing is done to address ballooning government debt, it will reach 16 billion in a decade. And this now seems conservative, given in the first 4 years, we're now 2/3 towards this path. These aren't just numbers on a page, they have real implications for Tasmanians. And they demonstrate why it's important now more than ever that the government spends wisely and in the areas of greatest need, really to achieve the best possible social and economic outcomes for every dollar it spends. The budget again contained a gender budget snapshot, and this was measuring the impact of the government's initiatives on gender inequality. The quality of the analysis has really improved substantially, and some metrics like board representation show real progress. However, systemic inequities in labour force participation, leadership roles, industry segregation and safety outcomes remain entrenched. So let's turn now to what was announced in yesterday's budget and what it means for Tasmanians, as well as what it means for the government's priorities. And I want to preface these slides by reinforcing the point that the cost of living crisis is not over. Inflation is at its height below its height of 2 years ago, but prices are still continuing to rise. Electricity, food, water, childcare, health and insurance are all increasing by more than CPI, while Tasmanians continue to earn the lowest wages in the country. In this context, cost of living measures should not be wound back, but extended and better targeted. Next 2 slides we'll go through quickly, but you'll have an opportunity to look at these in more detail when we send you out the slide pack this afternoon in our budget wrap-up. And while there are some very welcome announcements here, there is widespread disappointment across the industry that the funding announcements fall well short of what is needed. And as we hear more from our members on the reactions to the budget, we are increasingly concerned that there is insufficient funding and resourcing to meet their level of need. We'll talk firstly about health. So Tasmania is facing a growing burden of chronic disease, with Tasmanians more likely to have at least one long-term health condition than people living in any other state or territory. We see this reflected in a health system that's struggling to keep up with increasing demand, resulting in long GP and specialist waiting lists, ambulance ramping, long time wait lists for the emergency department, as well as significant service gaps, especially for mental health services. We were looking to this budget to establish a dedicated preventative health budget of 5% of total spending on health. At a total health spend of $14.5 billion, this would have seen $725 million allocated to preventive health. Now let's have a look at housing. I think you'll agree that the state of housing in Tasmania continues to get worse, not better. Affordability continues to deteriorate, rental stress is widespread, and our social housing waitlist has blown out to a record high. If you haven't already, I'd encourage you to check out our State of Housing dashboard, which provides an analysis and reflection on the current situation and tracks progress towards government initiatives. This project will grow over time, and we're engaging with housing providers and advocates working in this space to partner with us around future iterations. So we were looking to this budget to see clear and measurable commitments around increasing the supply of social housing. But disappointingly, what we got was the re-announcement of funding within the existing 10,000 homes strategy. As a starting point, we call on the government to undertake a review of the adequacy of the 10,000 homes and the 2,000 social homes targets. Also to commit to significant expansion of social housing and to urgently bring forward the review of the Residential Tenancy Act. Next, we'll move on to food security. And we welcome the funding of $7 million over 4 years to support emergency food relief programs, while also looking to food resilience in the future. But there is more that could be delivered. We heard from Minister Jaensch earlier this month that the renewed food resilience strategy will be released later this year. This plan to achieve food security is needed sooner rather than later, as we're hearing from community members that there are high levels of food waste and difficulties in accessing affordable food for people living on low incomes. And parents tell us that they simply don't eat. They regularly go without meals simply so their children can. The next area that we'll look at is energy. The next cost of living, the Tasmanian electricity prices will rise by more than 2% from 1 July. These further increases are on top of the 23% increase over the last 3 years. Energy rebates are welcome and necessary while energy prices remain high. But one-off energy rebates provided to everyone, such as the renewable energy dividend, are poorly targeted, expensive, and don't provide the permanent bill relief that other solutions offer. In particular, greater investment in home energy efficiency upgrades for low-income housing and renters. Next area we'll look at is transport. Public transport is critical to living a good life in Tasmania. We were looking to this budget to make significant per capita investments into public transport, including restoring suspended services and improving services in areas of socioeconomic disadvantage. We welcome the announcement that half-price bus fares will continue for students and regional Tasmanians, but for other users, in a cost of living crisis, the price of public transport is about to double. It's disappointing our call for free public bus fares for students, seniors, concession card holders and people living on low incomes was not recognised as a sensible measure for providing a relief to household budgets, as well as increasing economic and community participation. The next area we'll look at is digital inclusion. TasCOSS and others have long been calling for a significant investment in digital inclusion programs to improve the digital literacy and skills of Tasmanians and close the digital divide. Each year, our hopes have been dashed in this area, and this budget is no different. With no additional funding for the government's key digital inclusion initiatives, Digital Ready for Daily Life and online access centres, beyond next month, we were looking to the budget to provide crucial investment in digital inclusion programs. The only reference to programs identified in the budget papers is a meagre $125,000 to 2610 communities. And this is a cut to current funding levels at a time when the government must take the lead and materially increase investment in digital inclusion programs. The next area we'd like to look at is children and young people. And we are concerned that this budget does not focus on targeted initiatives and resources needed to fully implement the recommended changes from the Commission of Inquiry. Whilst this government is committing to spending big on youth prisons and police equipment, we, along with others, have called for increased investments into the services and initiatives that work with children and families in the first 1,000 days of a child's life. It is unclear whether this budget will provide the resourcing needed to fully implement trauma-informed, evidence-based approaches to keeping children safe. Now, next slide is about industry sustainability. The budget sees the continuation of the government's commitment to an indexation figure over 4 years. However, as everyone in this room is aware, this rate doesn't reflect the true cost of doing business, and it doesn't address the increasing costs of insurance, rent, energy and compliance, just to name a few. We're aware of an increasing number of services that are cutting hours, cutting staff, changing service delivery models, as well as cutting services completely. And sadly, we believe this is just the tip of the iceberg of the crisis that is coming in community services. Following years of advocacy by many, many people in this room, it was welcome to see the government recognising our industry's contribution by moving towards 5-year contracts for our industry. And we acknowledge the work of the government in moving towards 5-year contracts, and we're looking forward to a progress update and a clear timeline for the rollout of this when we hear from the Minister shortly. But there is more work to do. Yesterday, for example, we were aware of several of our peak bodies who went into the budget lockup not knowing if they would receive funding come 1 July or any certainty around their future funding contracts. We call on the government to commit to a funding review process which starts at least 6 months before the end of the contract date. So while we've made progress on indexation and a promise to move to 5-year funding contracts and an outcomes framework, we're well aware that industry sustainability is much broader than indexation and contracts, and our commitment to ensuring our industry's long-term sustainability remains unwavering. On that note, I would like to now hand over to the Hon Roger Jaensch MP, Minister for Community Services.
Thank you, Adrienne, and thank you, Georgie, and the TasCOSS team, the board, the dedicated members and leaders in our community sector who are here today, and thank you all for the magnificent work that you do throughout the year for Tasmanians in need. We're all in this together, and I'm very pleased to see in this room so many members of Parliament as well, from across parties and no party. Mr. O'Byrne, I'm always reminded, both houses of Parliament here in Tasmania as well. You as a sector are very well loved and supported, and at a recent Neighbourhood House Week event, can I make this a little bit taller, Lisa? Thank you. Thank you. Fantastic. In Neighbourhood House Week, just recently we resolved, I think, to agree that we all love our neighbourhood houses more than everybody else. So thank you very much for the work that you do throughout the year. Thanks for the opportunity to address you here today. And thank you very much, Adrienne, for the overview and some of the framing of today's discussion about the budget that was brought down by Treasurer Barnett yesterday. I probably need to provide another context to this budget as well. First, we continue to be preparing budgets in the aftermath of a period of extraordinary, unplanned but essential expenditure for the people of Tasmania. And included in that are the periods of COVID, the periods covering the Commission of Inquiry and our response to it, and the continuing response to it through events like the provision of compensation for people harmed by historical practices and government's responses to them. That has taken a very, very large chunk out of our ongoing state finances and gives us a long-term project to bring our state back into surplus over the long term. We're fortunate that we're doing this at a time, though, when, because of that expenditure, our state's economy has been able to remain strong and growing and able to maintain employment levels and unemployment levels at historically low levels, particularly for unemployment in Tasmania. And now I know there's a lot to unpack inside that, but our situation would be far worse and far, far more challenging right now if our economy was very weak or broken, if our unemployment levels were very, very high, and our state's capacity to raise revenue to provide for supports for people was diminished. And so the decisions behind our budgets include the need to keep the economy strong and employment strong in Tasmania, so that more people are able to feed themselves and their families, and we're able to generate the revenue needed to pay for important public services and supports that we will always need. But we need to have the basis for generating that income, that revenue that we can reinvest in people's well-being and quality of life. So we are on a journey of balancing the repair of our finances as a state whilst continuing to maintain a strong economy and pay for the sorts of services that we work on together in this sector as well. And that's the delicate balance. We all have to make the decisions, get our balances right in our budgeting as organisations and in our families as well. And we always have more wishes than capacity to meet all needs. And so when our budget process starts in the last quarter of each year and our agencies start to bring together, and our government departments, their advice to us as ministers on what the core operations of government look like, what new commitments we've made that we need to address, things like commission of inquiry, like commitments made through election processes and through the year when unforeseen events arise. They show us which things we have made commitments to in addition to that are going to continue over into the next year, and those which are going to finish, and what decisions we need to make about them. And then we also have the process where the community budget submissions come in from organisations like yours and other industry bodies, every sector, lots of individual local communities and local governments and all the rest all raise their real and legitimate needs and well thought out plans and costings to say we would like these things addressed too. And then we start going through the argy-bargy and the very difficult prioritisation processes to make sure that we can deliver a budget that covers the essentials, invests in the future, and more importantly, that enables us to maintain that focus on keeping our economy moving strongly, providing the services that we need, and getting back into a position of surplus in our budget for the future, so that we have reserves for the next unplanned essential expenditure around something like COVID or commission of inquiry in the future, whatever form they might take, because that's an important buffer to have. And so this is just by way of a backdrop to the outputs that you see in the budget that was handed down yesterday. And I'm not going to go through line by line or attempt to fill in any gaps or in-betweens. I'm sure that there'll be things that we can deal with in questions. But in my portfolio in this sector, the approach that we've taken to the budget decision-making this time is to continue the core business of government, our government functions that everybody relies on, to ensure that we can continue to fund previous commitments and agreements that continue across the years of the budget. So where we've got formal agreements and where we've made commitments to people, that we're able to continue that. That includes investing in new strategies and action plans in many areas of our work: food resilience and volunteering, the LGBTIQA+ strategies, multicultural, older Tasmanians, and things like preventive health as well. Investing in the strategies that we said we would have, and then working on how we fund either the commencement of the work under those strategies where the detail is known, or the continuation of existing projects until those new strategies kick in future years. So there's some bridging work there as well. And all of those different subsectors of this sector with their strategies are in different stages of that transition. So ageing, volunteering, food resilience are all at different stages of work continuing and waiting for the new plan to come in, which will show us that where our future budgets need to be directed. We have also invested, as Adrienne acknowledged, in this area of sustainability and efficiency in the sector as a whole. And I really think that this is a critically important focus area for us going forward and working together, as you said, as a sector. It includes the work around the community services funding reform, the indexation, which I'm very pleased to say is for this financial year at 3.5%, whereas CPI is at 1.4%. We believe the locked-in indexation that we have agreed to and committed to is addressing your growing costs over and above background CPI. We will continue to measure and monitor that as we reach the end of this first committed period. And we do believe that there is a lot more work to do to remove red tape and administrative burden from you as organisations, to improve the way that we procure and contract services from you and move away from lots and lots and lots of repeated grants with a very high burden of application and acquittal paperwork, which seems to no sooner got the contracts than we have to start acquitting the outputs, and the timeframes are short. As you said before, moving to the 5-year funding agreements, but I think there's more, and I'm happy to spend a few more minutes talking about that one as well. But a couple of other things that we've added into the budget over this last year and going into next year as well, which are not expensive, but I think very important. These are areas where I've indulged a bit because in a budget where it's difficult to fund new things, we've found room for a couple of things that I think send important messages. And they're about valuing the people in our sector who make it work, particularly in terms of our growing capacity and policies of supporting and remunerating people with lived experience in our sector, in our community, who serve on advisory boards and committees and give us their advice. They are experts. They provide perspectives that we can't get from any consultant, and we want to ensure that they're valued and enabled and supported to speak from their experience and from their hearts to inform what we do, so that our work is authentic and recognisable to them as meeting the mark. It's a small investment to make for a very valuable contribution that those people bring. The second one, which may or may not have made it to your list, is the commitment to make our working with vulnerable people checks process free for volunteers. This is a response to, and it's a small gift, which we shouldn't need to give, for people who are giving such a big gift of their time and expertise to work in all of our organisations, all of our communities, every single day. We couldn't afford to pay for that work or the love that it comes wrapped in if it was something we had to do in the open market. We want to make sure that those people's work is valued. We know that we won't be able to make a huge dent in their expenditure, but we want that gesture to be felt. We know that these things come at a cost. We know that $20-something, even if it's only every 5 years, the week that it falls due, it's happening in an already stretched household budget. And we know that there are many organisations here who are currently covering that cost or administering a set of rebates and things like that. And that's another administrative burden that we would like to lift from you. And so we'll be working with volunteering and member organisations here to make sure that we're getting the settings right for that and rolling that program out. Most likely, I'm told, in August. I'm doing August without saying it. August. We need to make sure that people are aware that that's coming and how it's going to work, and do it in the most administratively effective way we can, so that we just cut out some of that clutter and backwards and forwards that you will accumulate. So Again, not a big budget dollar item, but I think an important signal of where we want to move to, because as I understand it, one of the enormous structural challenges facing our sector is the availability of volunteers, the struggles, and be it in this community services sector or any sporting club, each of which also performs a role in our community, giving people something to belong to, somewhere to stay active, to have the social interactions, all those other things that underpin our well-being. So they're the principles that we took to the budget that you've seen here, and the more detailed breakdown that'll come through analysis, I'm sure, over coming days. There are a range of other things, but I'm not going to read you lists of things with energy hardship grants and all of the areas. I want to use just a couple of minutes, if I still have them, before questions, just to revisit the sustainability and funding review. As I said, we've got the indexation, guaranteed proper compounding indexation locked in now, and it's sitting well above CPI. We have commenced work with, I think it's 22 peak bodies in the sector, community services organisations who are working with government to be the guinea pigs for the prototyping of our new longer-term 5-year agreements, moving away from repeated short-term grants for activities that are just repeated and the same again and again and again. That's why we went to the peaks. Their role stays relatively the same over long periods of time. We need to be able to deal with this as a different sort of agreement that is a more legitimate mechanism for funding a service rather than a one-off project, removing some of the transaction costs and the handling busyness from that, and providing you with more certainty of funding and fewer episodes of having to go out and do it all over again. In the next tranche of that, once the peak bodies are involved, one of the advantages also of working with the peaks is that they're peaks for a whole lot of other bodies. They can give us insights into how this works for their members. So in the peak bodies, they will be able to give us insights as we go through this with them. How would this work for 35 neighbourhood houses, for example? And what would work and wouldn't work for them as we go through this together. So that's another benefit of this staged approach. The next groups that I would like to see dealt with, and I'm just looking to my department here, just write this down, Marlene, as we go, are where we've got a large number of organisations with very similar functions and agreements, like neighbourhood houses, 35 houses. The agreements are all going to be about the same. If we can crack a way of doing those agreements, we cover a lot of the ground through that and create the benefits to a number of organisations all at once. The other group I'm interested in are those organisations which tend to be slightly bigger, who have a lot of agreements with the government. So they're, neighbourhood houses have each got maybe one agreement with the government, and there's 35 of them. I've got some other organisations who've got 35 agreements with the government, same organisation. And it might be that those agreements overlap each other a little bit and don't need to. It's just possible that those organisations are big themselves and they're doing lots of agreements with government and overlapping the handling. Maybe we're not using that money efficiently. Maybe there is a better mechanism for doing that. And this is where, in my part of health in particular, I think we've got some examples that we need to look closely at. And so that's a challenging area. The thing to come with that is an outcomes framework, which gives us the ability across government and across the sector to be very clear and to show anyone who's looking or asking what it is that we're buying, what it is that we agree is the most important thing to deliver, and get away from being bothered about how you do it. Because particularly when you're out in your sector, in your part of Tasmania, You'll know the ground, you'll know your partners, your opportunities for subcontracting or getting into innovative partnerships with other delivery agents or with each other far better than we will. To some extent, as far as I'm concerned, as the Minister accountable for the money, what did we get for what we paid? What was it that we agreed to do? And if you find ways to innovate, to deliver it for less money and reinvest the balance into doing more, good on you. I want to get into that area as soon as possible, but we need some agreed framework to do that so that we can build our agreements around what we achieve for people rather than just how much work we did, which is, I think, where we're a bit stuck at the moment. It's quite inefficient. And on top of those other benefits with indexation and such, I think we can free up a double-digit percentage of the value of our money to deliver more and give you as organisations a better ability to manage your organisation's business and to do it efficiently and manage your staffing and the way you procure services too. One of the things that has come up a bit in this last little while that I've taken particular note of is the number of organisations whose funding agreements that they've got now expire in a month's time and are dependent on the budget that was landed yesterday. That to me is something we should be able to plan to avoid, having your need for an update on funding and our ability to tell you what we can do falling in the same month. You can see it coming a year out, and then we just sort of, it happens again and again. And I understand the stresses that creates for you and your employees and the inefficiencies that it can generate in your organisations if you have to wind things down and then quickly wind them up again. That's one of the things that I think we can do a whole lot better. And that extends also, I think, to how we make submissions into the budget process and the timing of those, and not only the way we set the terms of our contracts. So I'm keen for my relationship with you on behalf of the government, not just to be about how much money you need. I want to be in this with you, designing how we work together as an industry, as a sector, to deliver the things that we agree are important, most efficient way with the resources that we've got available to us. I think that we have underinvested in how we do that well. I think we have been more focused in the past in everybody delivering their wish list and hoping that they get their share, which is fair enough, and you've got to do that, and you've got to advocate and go in hard. I have to as well, around a cabinet table, against all of the other competing demands. So we're all in the jungle doing this together. In our part of the jungle, we need to work out how we get far smarter at doing that. Take some of those stresses out, create some efficiencies, create room for innovation, make this an industry that attracts and keeps really good people and they can see a future in, and that we give people the opportunity to be innovative managers and entrepreneurs in our sector, rather than people who just run applying for grants all the time and are quitting them. Because I think we're better than that, and the work that we do deserves more. So I'm happy to take questions that you may have about this budget and the things that I've said just now, and where we go from here. And thank you for your attention, and again, thank you for the magnificent work that you do in the community.
Thank you, Minister. And it was heartening to hear your acknowledgement of the stress that many of our organisations were feeling yesterday in the budget lockup. And I think you heard from some yesterday when you were talking with people, but not knowing whether your funding will run out and you have to let staff go within a month's time is incredibly stressful, and really, I think, isn't in the spirit, I guess, of a true partnership between community services and the government. And I guess I also just want to reiterate that really I believe that the community services industry is one of the greatest resources for the government. We really are the ones that are out there every single day hearing about the pain being experienced by individuals, but also what we're experiencing ourselves as organisations and within our teams, and the kind of cuts that are being made across the sector, and the stress that these for community services, because what we want to be doing is supporting not just Tasmanians from disadvantaged backgrounds, but all Tasmanians. And I think if Tasmanians are the losers, or if Tasmanians miss out, that is not something that any of us want. So I really believe that we're the greatest resource and should be one of the most important partners for government. So I really would like to, I think there will be some questions in the room today, possibly some of the things that you've touched on, but some other things as well. So I really would love to open up to questions. The Minister can stay around for about another 20 minutes or so. But if I can just ask you, if you do have a question for the Minister, if you could put your hand up, and Karen, who's up the back, will come along and find you with the microphone. If you're joining us online, you can put your question in the chat and we'll cover off as many as we can. Also ask, just for the benefit of the recording, if you have a question, if you could say your name and the organisation that you're coming from, and that same goes for people who are joining us online. So let's take some questions.
Minister Donald Coventry, I work for Sears & Buck as a recruiter, but I'm asking this question as a board member for the Southern Employment Training Network in the Huon Valley. I know it's not your strict portfolio, but nevertheless,
thank you for offering me out. Yes.
In our work supporting recruitment across Tasmania, we see the transformative impact that secure employment, especially in regional communities, brings. With the budget's investment in workforce participation and skills, how is the government ensuring these programs translate into lasting jobs for people who face structural barriers, including those in regional and marginalised areas?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the work that you do, particularly for people in regional and marginalised areas. There's enormous stability and dignity comes with people being able to feed themselves and their families and to provide for them. You're right, we need to provide more than the basic skills requisites. We understand that people also need supports of various kinds to be able to present for work and to continue to work. I think there's important roles for people who are based in those communities with those people to feed in what those requirements might be. So that we are not setting people up to fail. I think that's one of the critical things, particularly for young people and those entering the workforce for the first time as well. So the jobs hubs and other types of activities that have been undertaken, which are meeting people where they live and making the connections to other services they might not have been aware of or unable to navigate alone, are critically important. And for feedback loops for them to be able to advise government on where there is no service in an area of need is absolutely critical. So it has to be a two-way street. We need to be listening and ensuring that we're setting up those services to be able to not only deliver out, but deliver messages back to us as government where we've got gaps in services. Thank you.
Have another question?
Thank you. It's Simone Zell from Neighbourhood Houses Tasmania. And I think both Adrienne and the Minister have really spoken about, in community services, we are about solutions. We are really good at working together, and at Neighbourhood Houses Tasmania, the peak body, we were, up until yesterday, one of the peak bodies that didn't know whether we would have our full complement of the core work that we were going to, deliver. And so we found out yesterday that we don't, that, we'll now have to make some decisions around, what parts of what we do as a peak body will need to change and shift. And I know that there's at least 4 other peaks in the room that are also in that situation. I was also listening to the Treasurer this morning talking about community services as being really important, and indeed the Premier saying, you know, this was at the TCCI breakfast, that community services is really, you know, important to be able to make our state be able to support people who aren't in the position to enjoy the amazing lives that we know that they can. But my question is, and I really loved what you were saying, Minister, about getting smarter about how we plan and how we work together. I would like to see that shift and that change, because it's a very difficult situation to be in, to be putting your heart and soul out there and trying to put yourself forward, to be then told that, no, you're not a priority. Because we know that, and I hear from you that we probably are a priority, but that how can we actually make the funding that we've got go to the right, for the whole state, go into what we need to prioritise, which is people in communities, shifting disadvantage. We know that if we invest in that way, we can do that. And you've got a whole room of people that are solutions kind of people. So we want to work with you. How do we get from here to what that vision that you just talked about before?
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Simone, and thanks again for the work that you do. And good on you, Lou. Give her another kiss. Yeah. We do need to get out of this sort of cycle of sort of coming to the desperate end of something and then hanging on, hoping that it continues. One of the things that we do need to deal with when we're building these new types of agreements, and the peak bodies are a good place to start with it, is to recognise that our organisations that we're working with in the sector often have many different agreements, some of which are for year-on-year recurrent functions and services, and some are for a fixed term to do a particular job. We also know that you may have many of those from many different sources, and you hold it together by managing them all together. What I also think happens is that sometimes we use that whole envelope to support some critical functions of our organisations, which are then at risk when one component finishes. And that creates instability in organisations. I think that our agreements need to be able to very clearly quarantine the recurrent core business functions that we're contracting from the one-off short-term things, so that we don't confuse the two. We don't use short-term money for long-term things that we rely on until they stop, and then we're in trouble. Now, we've got also across the sector organisations of varying maturity and capability in terms of having accountants and you know, boards of management with good corporate skill and understanding of these risks and these sort of things. We've got great variability in that, which we need to keep investing in too, which we've discussed with the houses as well. So there's an ongoing program to manage both of those things. It's unfair for us to have just a pile of short-term grants and relatively inexperienced people managing them with their heart, getting another grant where they can to fill a gap, but then finding that something essential is missing out when that particular job finishes. At the worst, what can happen is that you sometimes find that you're using money for a purpose other than what you got it for, and that can also present a risk to an organisation. And we need to make sure that we don't put good community organisations with volunteer boards at risk of getting themselves into that sort of trouble as well. So governance is important, but also the way we structure the draft of funding agreements that the government has with organisations, getting it clear and keeping it not mixing up one with the other is very important as well. Timing is, yes. So, and we'll be hopefully setting the pattern for that with the first range of agreements with the peak bodies over the coming months.
actually got some questions online, so let's just hold these ones and we'll go to the online question.
That one though, Tanya.
Hello. I feel a bit like a judge on Dancing with the Stars over here, to be honest. All right. Moderating desk. I've got one from Donna Bain from Launceston Community Legal Centres. Donna says, collaboration across services sectors is seen as a way to strengthen service delivery. Collaboration takes investment, though. Will the government consider funding enhancements to support collaborative service design and delivery, including efforts that cross portfolios?
Yes. Yes, we will. Bring your plan, bring your proposal. That's the sort of challenge back. We can be open to it, but give us your idea and let us work through the detail of it and make it work. What we've got at the moment, just so, well, is it online, the person who sent that message to? So Donna might be in that camera. Donna, one of the things that's happening at the moment is that we've got a working group of senior people from several different government agencies who are involved in contracting community service organisations with Treasury people, looking at the details of how we do this. What we should be able to come up with is some standard ways of contracting services that are common across those agencies and give us the ability to have more joined up agreements that where at the government end we can see the range of participants across government, not just you, because sometimes we end up with organisations that have an agreement with several different parts of government and then become frustrated when those parts of government don't talk to each other or don't line up. We need to have an agreement where you can see everyone who's involved and where those synergies are. So I think we've got some mechanisms that are working at the moment on this longer term funding agreements at work, which can help deliver our end of that. But my experience has always been that the people on the ground closest to where the need is are best to see where the different services need to come together. So please tell us that story and let us have a go at working out how we respond to it in a joined up way from government's end.
Collaboration from Donna, but I'd just probably also like to add genuine partnership and what that actually means, because I think really what we saw yesterday and probably what we've been hearing from members over the last 24 hours or so is that it hasn't felt like genuine partnership. It felt like we have been, like people going to the lockup not actually knowing whether they'll have to close their service in the next month. It probably doesn't feel like us being a valued partner. So we would love to work together with you more on that and really hear from you about what that means. Yep.
So just on that, and we've talked about the timing thing, but I will also just say that if you've got a funding agreement that's got an end date in it, you need to be planning for that to end and to not be dependent on it. If you've got a funding agreement which extends over the next period, you know that you've got certainty for that. We need to get the timing better so that critical things like budgets don't fall at the same time as end of agreements if there is going to be the opportunity of renewal. But we also need to be clear in our contracting so that we are making a clear distinction between things that are fixed term and things that are likely to be renewed and renewed and renewed. We've got to get rid of those ones and turn them into longer term service agreements.
Agree. Now we had some questions, I think Tanya and Yvette.
Tanya had one.
Yeah.
Oh, hi everyone. Tanya Hunt, CEO, Youth Network of Tasmania. I just wanted to back in the sentiments from Simone with respect to sustainability challenges that we are facing. And I guess in terms of negotiating contracts with community services is actually looking at the investment that's made with the agreed outcomes in mind, because often what is provided through government to deliver on outcomes is highly inadequate and insufficient. And not only does it put, I guess, the organisation sustainability in jeopardy, it also has a huge psychological stress and impact on staff working within those organisations. And I think the government has a responsibility to adequately fund the work that you're asking us to do.
No, I agree. And we have to be able to agree on what it is we're aiming to achieve, and then we have to agree on the costs involved in achieving that. Don't enter it if you don't agree, is probably my thing. And at both ends of that, we have to make sure that we're informed and that we've got a way of working out what the fair cost of things is. That's another part of this, working out what's the outcomes we're seeking, and what we can reasonably expect the cost of delivering that to be. And then also leaving the potential there for you to find a smarter, better, cheaper way wherever that's possible. That might be by partnering with another organisation to deliver part of that work if they're better set up to do it than you are, and leaving room for some innovation in that. I'm keen to ensure that we're not asking people to oversimplify the work and break it down into just the costs of doing the job, but rather always look at ways to make it work better. I think that gives you as organisations the ability to grow as well.
Time for one more question, unfortunately. Sorry, because Yvette did have her hand up, so if I could just go to you, Yvette. Yeah.
Yvette Seatle, Women's Legal Service, Tasmania, CEO. If I can just think about what you're saying about operationally, Minister, and short and long-term contracts, we have a mixture of those. Many of them do expire at the end of financial years, and I take on board what you're saying about don't plan for them to stay. Like plan for them to go. The implications for that is that we can't retain skilled workers because the date comes up and then they're gone, and then we have to retrain other people that might not have the skills that we need. So it seems to me an easy fix to that might be to not have them ending at 30 June, which most of them do. Exactly. That might be an easy fix. And can I also... It
might be more sensible, for example, to have our contracts built around a calendar year, not the budget year.
Or something like that, so that we're not waiting. Yeah. And the other question, the question that I've got really about it is when you're talking about short and long-term contracts, do you mean that operational costs will be built into the delivery of some of those? And if I can give you an example, we've got one with the state government where we've actually been told we will deliver at a level, 6.1 of SHADS, an experienced lawyer. It'll be an FTE, so we kind of micromanage. So that kind of innovation that you're mentioning is a bit insulting in that context, because we're also told we will do remote work with that, and that comes out of our philanthropy, fundraising money, and with permission out of other Commonwealth money to actually fund a car, travel allowances, so that that worker can safely deliver the work. And so, it's operationally, that isn't built into short-term contracts. So I'm not sure if when you were talking about operations, whether that's the kind of detail that you were talking about, like that being reflected in short-term contracts, that we do have to run the positions operationally, and that costs money.
Yeah. Thanks. This legal service, I'm not familiar with details for the legal service, and I should imagine that there are some key stipulations in there, because you'll need levels of servicing and people with particular qualifications and et cetera to be able to do that. What I'm talking about more generally is that we have organisations who provide a relatively consistent service over recurrent over a long period of time. A peak body, for example, that provides a fundamental service to their membership and their sector, which is pretty much the same year on year over the life of that organisation or that sector. It's silly for us to have a grant agreement for a year at a time or 2 years at a time for that, where we could lock it in for a 5-year period and know what the jobs are, everyone knows what to expect, and there's an agreed pricing associated with delivering that we all see, and there's some flexibility for the organisation to work out how to manage its delivery of those things. The short-term agreements I'm talking about typically are the ones that are for a project or an event in a time-limited context. The difficulty is sometimes when they get merged into the same thing, and that becomes difficult to manage, and I think we need to be better at distinguishing one from the other. It might be, though, that we end up with a core contract with an organisation for its recurrent services, and the ability to have a form of schedule or addendum to that to deal with shorter term separate activities as well. And anyway, I'm getting into an area that's probably going to be quite different from for your organisation to others, but we clearly need to do better at delivering these things for all the reasons that you've raised, and I think that's a very important thing for us to be investing in over this next year and next couple of years. And I'm happy to talk to you directly about your service and what it's running into with my department who are here.
Minister, if I could just say, I think you heard yesterday in the lockup, and I think you're hearing it pretty loud and clear today, that there is some real concern. People are worried and fearful, and not just because we always had our hands out and want more money because we want, bigger services, because we're worried about what this will mean for the well-being of Tasmanians. So I'm really thinking about where we take this conversation, because I know once you leave the room, it will continue. It'll be really good now to get a next step from you about how we can actually continue this conversation with you. I know, can I just add, sorry, I know in yesterday's budget there was a line item around industry sustainability, and we're not exactly sure what that means yet, but I wonder if there's some work that could possibly happen that will tie into that.
With there's $150,000 that we've identified in there towards, and it came off the back of a submission from TasCOSS and a discussion that we had about that. We're not with that. My view is that rather than commissioning a long strategy for how to do that, and then having a response to that that's funded in future budgets, etc., I want to use that to give us the ability to buy some work, to pay for some costs associated with really identifying and nailing a couple of things that are of particular interest right now. And I know that there's the contracting and the reforms in the way that we contract for services, but there's also other things that we've discussed that are perhaps more in the sector's side of things, about how you might have opportunities to innovate with shared services in the sector, what shortages or challenges we're facing in accessing, I don't know, that the HR services, the insurances that you need, those sorts of things, which are barriers to your sustainability, which aren't necessarily part of your agreements with government, but which are also problematic for you. Now, if we can use that resource to get to first base and work out what a couple of those are that affect a lot of organisations that government might be able to then help you to resolve, I think that would be a good start. And that we will talk further with you about how we get a relevant group of people into the room to pick off some of those things. And my view is also, I love strategies and plans, but I hate always waiting for one to be finished or funded in order to be able to do things. So I would like to have, I'm not going to say quick and dirty, but I would like us to be able to rapidly get consensus on what's a couple of things that it's worth trying out that could be transformative in the sector, that the government could assist you with, but it may not be about government's role with you. It may be about how we can support development in the sector on things like developing a shared services model or some other procurement platforms that you might be able to use, shared coverage under insurance policies, etc., like that. Like some other sectors have got quite advanced in this. We could perhaps borrow from them as well, but would be led by the sector as to what's most important.
Well, I think it's about sustainability, isn't it? Yeah. What does industry sustainability look like, and how can we work in partnership together? Thank you, Minister. I know you need to dash off to another engagement, so I just want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
And just while the Minister is departing, if you need to dash off now, that's fine. Oh, lovely. Okay. Just apologies if we didn't get to your questions today, but we would really encourage you to email them through to us. So comms@tascos.org.au, but anybody you know at TasCOSS, feel free to send them a question or write them down, give them to one of our policy team that are here today. And we will provide them to the Minister, and we'll get the response back to you as well. So I'm sure you'll appreciate the budget papers are quite big. So if we haven't been able to include every measure from the state budget in our analysis today, or if there's anything you'd like us to particularly look at, please reach out to our policy team. So we've got Todd, Alexandra and Steve in the room today, and they'd love to get your questions and comments and thoughts. Also later today, we will be sending out an analysis, including a recording of today's session and the slides. Just before we close and let you get back to a bit of networking and have another cup of tea, just like to give a quick plug again for our post-budget online policy conversation next week. So we'll be joined by Professor Richard Eccleston to unpack the budget with a focus particularly on its implications for industry and how well it addresses some of the most pressing issues facing Tasmanians today. On the 17th of June, we have an opportunity to hear from and engage with the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Dean Winter MP, who's also here with us today, and I know that Dean's looking forward to the event, as are we looking forward to hearing from him. And not to take a missed opportunity, but we are holding our biennial conference in Launceston this year on the 12th and 13th of August. And the theme of the conference is Shaping Our Future Together. So we'd love to see you up in Launceston for our conference. We've announced 2 keynote speakers already. One is George Meglogenis and Dr. Lisa Denny, who's also with us today and on the TasCOSS board, and they're on the preliminary program, which will be released next week, but early bird tickets close soon, so it'd be great if you could get your registration in. You can register for all of these events on the TasCOSS website. I would again like to acknowledge the TasCOSS members in the room today. Thank you for your work in supporting Tasmanians and for your tireless advocacy on their behalf. Thank you to the TasCOSS board, to the team, and to everyone else who joined us in the room and online. I hope you found today's event informative and useful, and we would love to hear any of your feedback at any time about how we can make this event more useful in the future. And we look forward to seeing you next year. So thanks so much for coming, and feel free to mingle. Thanks.